The blood trail in the snow led straight to her death, and Katherine Foster knew it as she stumbled through the white wilderness of Idaho Territory in December 1882. Her fingers numb inside her torn gloves and her breath coming in ragged gasps that froze the moment they left her lips. She had been running for 3 days now, ever since she witnessed the Garrett gang murder the stagecoach driver outside of Lewiston and take everything of value, including the payroll she had been transporting for her father's mining company. They had seen her face, recognized her as the Foster girl whose father owned half the profitable claims in the territory, and she knew they could not afford to let her live to testify against them. The pine trees towered above her like silent sentinels, their branches heavy with snow that occasionally fell in soft whispers, and she pressed forward even though her legs screamed in protest and her vision blurred at the edges. Behind her, she could hear them calling to each other, their voices carrying across the frozen landscape with terrifying clarity. There were 5 of them, hardened outlaws with nothing to lose and murder already on their hands. Katherine had left Lewiston 3 days ago with such hope, carrying the payroll to the mining camp where her father waited, proud that he trusted her with such an important task at 20 years old. Now she might never see him again, might never tell him she loved him one more time, might die out here in this beautiful, merciless wilderness with no one to know what became of her. She crested a small rise, and her foot caught on a hidden root beneath the snow. Katherine went down hard, crying out as her knee struck something solid beneath the white powder. Pain shot through her leg and tears sprang to her eyes, freezing on her lashes. She tried to stand, but her knee buckled, and despair washed over her like the icy wind that cut through her inadequate coat. This was it then. This was where her story ended, 20 years old and frozen in the Idaho mountains because she had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. "Found her tracks," a voice shouted from somewhere too close. "She is heading north toward the canyon." Katherine forced herself up, limping now, leaving a more obvious trail as she dragged her injured leg through the snow. The canyon ahead narrowed between 2 steep walls of rock and pine, and she had no idea if it led to salvation or simply trapped her like a rabbit in a snare. But she had no choice except to keep moving, to keep fighting for her life even as hope dwindled like the daylight that was already fading toward an early winter dusk. The gunshot cracked through the air, and bark exploded from a tree 6 inches from her head. Katherine screamed and threw herself forward, half running and half falling down a slope into deeper snow that came up to her thighs. She floundered through it, sobbing now with fear and exhaustion, knowing they were close enough to take shots at her, and that it was only a matter of time before one found its mark. Another shot rang out, but this one came from a different direction entirely. It was followed by a third and fourth in rapid succession, and suddenly the voices of the outlaws changed from predatory confidence to alarmed confusion. Katherine collapsed against a massive pine trunk, pressing herself into the shadows as she tried to understand what was happening. More gunfire echoed through the canyon, and she heard horses, the sound of men shouting orders she could not quite make out. Then a figure appeared through the snow, tall and broad-shouldered, leading a buckskin horse and carrying a rifle in the crook of his arm. He wore a heavy wool coat and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low against the snow, and he moved with the easy confidence of a man who knew these mountains like the back of his hand. Katherine shrank back against the tree, terrified that this was one of the outlaws, but then he spoke and his voice was gentle despite the circumstances. "You're safe now here," he said, crouching down a few feet away so as not to startle her. "Name is Zachary Frost. I have been tracking the Garrett gang for 2 days, and I sure am glad I found you before they did." Katherine stared at him, unable to quite believe what she was hearing. In the fading light, she could see his face more clearly now, strong-featured with several days of dark stubble and eyes that were a striking gray-blue, filled with concern as they took in her condition. He looked to be in his mid-20s, weathered by sun and wind but undeniably handsome in the rough way of men who spent their lives outdoors. "They were shooting at me," she managed to say through chattering teeth. "The gang. They killed the stagecoach driver and they know I saw them." "I know," Zachary said quietly. "I drove them off, but they will regroup once they realize I am alone. We need to get you somewhere safe and warm before full dark and before you lose any fingers or toes to frostbite." He stood and extended his hand to her. "Can you walk?" "I hurt my knee," Katherine admitted, and then she took his hand because what choice did she have? His grip was warm and strong through her frozen glove, and he pulled her up with easy strength. When her injured leg buckled immediately, he caught her around the waist without hesitation. "Going to put you on my horse," he said. "We have about 2 miles to my camp, and then another 5 miles to Lewiston come morning if you can make it. But first we need to get you warm and fed, and I need to make sure the gang does not double back looking for us." He lifted her onto the buckskin with a gentleness that surprised her, then swung up behind her in one fluid motion. Katherine found herself cradled against his chest, his arms around her as he gathered the reins, and even through the layers of clothing she could feel the warmth radiating from him. She had never been this close to a man who was not family, and under other circumstances she might have been mortified, but right now all she felt was profound relief. "Thank you," she whispered as he turned the horse and began picking his way through the darkening forest with the sure knowledge of someone who had traveled this route many times. "No need for thanks," Zachary replied. "Could not call myself any kind of man if I left a woman to freeze or worse in these mountains." He paused. "What is your name?" "Katherine Foster," she said. "My father owns the Silver Creek mining operations. I was transporting payroll when the gang ambushed our stage." She felt him tense slightly behind her. "John Foster's daughter. He has half the territory out looking for you. When you did not arrive at the camp 3 days ago, he rode to Lewiston and raised hell with the sheriff. There are search parties combing these mountains, though they are looking in the wrong places it seems." "I ran," Katherine said simply. "The driver told me to run while he held them off, and I did. I have been running ever since." "That took courage," Zachary said, and there was admiration in his voice. "Most folks would have frozen that first night. You must have some steel in your spine, Miss Foster." Katherine did not feel courageous. She felt exhausted and terrified, and so cold she was not sure she would ever be warm again. But his words gave her something to hold onto as they rode through the deepening darkness. The horse's steady gait and Zachary's solid presence behind her the only things keeping her from complete despair. The camp appeared like a miracle in the wilderness. A small clearing with a canvas lean-to strung between trees and a fire ring surrounded by stones. Zachary dismounted first and then helped Katherine down, catching her when her injured leg refused to support her weight. Without a word, he scooped her up in his arms and carried her to the lean-to, settling her on a bedroll that smelled of leather and wood smoke. "Going to get a fire going," he said. "Then I will tend your horse and make us some food. You just sit tight and try to warm up." Katherine watched through tired eyes as he moved around the camp with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, he had a fire blazing in the ring, the warmth reaching toward her like a physical embrace. He disappeared into the darkness to care for his horse, then returned with his saddlebags and a canteen. He knelt beside her and offered her the canteen. "Drink slow," he instructed. Your body is half frozen and you need to warm up from the inside." The water was cold but clean, and Katherine had never tasted anything so good. She drank as instructed, small sips that eased her parched throat. Zachary shrugged out of his coat and draped it over her shoulders on top of her own inadequate one, and the weight of it felt like safety itself. "Let me look at that knee," he said, and Katherine nodded her permission. He examined her leg with gentle, impersonal hands, pressing carefully around the joint. "Swollen but not broken. You will have a bad bruise, but you got lucky. Now let me check your hands and feet." He removed her boots and her ruined gloves, examining her extremities with the same careful attention. His touch was professional, the touch of a man who had dealt with cold injuries before, but Katherine felt her cheeks warm despite the temperature. There was something intimate about having this stranger, this man who had saved her life, holding her bare feet in his hands by firelight. "No frostbite that I can see, but it was close," he said finally. "You have good circulation, which probably saved you. Going to wrap your knee and get some food in you, and then you need to sleep. We will start for Lewiston at first light." "What about the gang?" Katherine asked. "They will not try anything tonight," Zachary said with certainty. "They know someone drove them off, and they do not know how many of us there are or how well armed. They will wait for daylight and better odds. By then we will have several hours head start, and once we get close to Lewiston, there will be search parties we can link up with." He moved away to prepare food, and Katherine watched him in the firelight, really seeing him for the first time now that she was not running for her life. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscled build of a man who worked hard for his living. His movements were economical and graceful, no wasted motion as he worked. There was a quiet competence about him that made her feel safe in a way she had not felt since the attack on the stagecoach. "Are you a lawman?" she asked. Zachary glanced at her, a slight smile tugging at his mouth. "Not exactly. I am a tracker and guide mostly, help folks navigate these mountains, track down lost cattle or horses, that sort of thing. But the Garrett gang has been terrorizing this territory for 6 months now, and the price on their heads got high enough that I decided to see if I could bring them in. Been tracking them for a week when I heard the gunshots and found you." "So you are a bounty hunter," Katherine said. "When the price is right and the cause is just," he admitted. "I have no love for outlaws who prey on innocent folks. The Garretts have killed at least 4 people that we know of, robbed a dozen stages and coaches, and generally made life hell for everyone trying to make an honest living in Idaho territory. Figured it was time someone did something about it." He brought her a tin plate with beans and salt pork, simple fare but hot and filling. Katherine ate ravenously, not realizing how hungry she was until the food was in front of her. Zachary settled across the fire with his own plate, his rifle within easy reach, and they ate in companionable silence for a while. "Thank you," Katherine said again when she finished. "For the food and the fire and for saving my life. I do not know how to properly express my gratitude." "You do not need to," Zachary said quietly. "Any decent person would have done the same." "But you did do it," Katherine insisted. "You put yourself in danger to help a stranger. That means something." Their eyes met across the fire, and Katherine felt something shift in the air between them, something she could not quite name. In the dancing firelight, his eyes looked almost silver, and there was an intensity in his gaze that made her heart beat faster for reasons that had nothing to do with fear or cold. "You should rest," Zachary said, breaking the moment. "I will keep watch. You are safe now, Miss Foster." "I give you my word." Katherine wanted to protest that he needed sleep too, but exhaustion was crashing over her in waves now that she was warm and fed and relatively safe. She lay down on the bedroll, Zachary's coat still wrapped around her, and the last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was his silhouette against the fire, keeping watch through the night. She woke to gray dawn light and the smell of coffee. Zachary was crouched by the fire, pouring liquid from a battered pot into 2 tin cups. He looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, and she realized he had stayed awake all night as promised. "Morning," he said when he saw her stirring. "How is the knee?" Katherine sat up carefully and tested her leg. It was stiff and sore, but better than the night before. "Hurts, but I can walk on it." "Good. We need to move soon. I heard horses about an hour ago, maybe 2 miles south. Could be the gang, could be a search party, but either way we should not wait to find out which." He handed her a cup of coffee and some hardtack, and Katherine ate quickly while he broke camp with the same efficient speed he had shown the night before. Within 20 minutes they were mounted and moving through the forest, Zachary's arm around her waist to keep her steady in the saddle. The morning was crisp and clear, the new snow sparkling in the early light. Under other circumstances it would have been beautiful, but Katherine kept looking over her shoulder, expecting to see the gang pursuing them. Zachary seemed to sense her nervousness because he kept up a steady stream of quiet conversation as they rode, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the territory. "Grew up around here," he said. "My father was a trapper, taught me these mountains before I was 10 years old. After he died, I stayed on, could not imagine living anywhere else. These mountains get in your blood." "Your mother?" Katherine asked softly. "Died when I was born," Zachary said. "It was just me and my father for 18 years and then just me for the last 7. I have a small ranch about 10 miles west of Lewiston, nothing fancy but enough to keep me fed and busy when I am not out tracking." "It sounds like a good life," Katherine said. "It is," Zachary agreed. "Lonely sometimes, but good. What about you, Miss Foster? What is your story?" Katherine told him about growing up in Lewiston, the only daughter of a mining entrepreneur who had struck it rich during the Idaho gold rush of the 1860s. Her mother had died of fever 5 years ago, and since then she had been helping her father run his business interests, learning everything she could about contracts and payroll and the 100 details that kept a mining operation running. "He wanted a son," she said. "But he got me instead, and he has made the best of it. Taught me to ride and shoot and keep books. I think he forgets sometimes that I am a woman and not the son he wanted." "Any man would be proud to have you as a daughter," Zachary said. "You are smart and brave, and you did not give up even when things looked darkest. That is more than many men could say." Katherine felt warmth spread through her chest at his words. They rode in silence for a while, and she found herself acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched, of his arm around her waist, and the solid strength of his chest against her back. She had known this man less than 12 hours, but she felt safer with him than she had ever felt with anyone except her father. Around mid-morning they heard horses again, closer this time. Zachary tensed and reached for his rifle, guiding his horse into a thick stand of pines. They waited in tense silence as the sound grew louder, and then voices carried through the clear air. "Miss Foster, Katherine Foster, if you can hear us, call out." "That is Samuel Price," Katherine said with relief. "He works for my father." Zachary relaxed slightly and guided his horse out of cover. 3 riders appeared through the trees, all bundled against the cold and carrying rifles. The lead rider, a grizzled man in his 50s, broke into a broad smile when he saw them. "Thank God," Samuel said. "John, your girl is alive." "We found her." More riders appeared, and suddenly they were surrounded by the search party. Katherine found herself answering a dozen questions at once, while Zachary quietly explained about driving off the gang and bringing her to his camp. One of the men offered her his horse so she could ride properly, but Katherine surprised herself by refusing. "I am fine where I am," she said, and caught the slight smile that tugged at Zachary's mouth. They rode into Lewiston in a group, and Katherine's father was waiting in the street outside the assay office. John Foster was a big man with graying hair and a weathered face, and when he saw his daughter, he let out a choked sound and ran toward them. Zachary helped Katherine down, and then John was crushing her in a bear hug, his whole body shaking. "Thank God," he kept saying. "Thank God. I thought I lost you, girl. I thought you were dead." "I am all right, Papa," Katherine said, her own tears flowing freely now. "This man saved me. Zachary Frost. He drove off the gang and kept me alive." John Foster turned to Zachary, his eyes bright with emotion. "Name your price, son. Anything you want. You brought my daughter back to me, and there is nothing I would not give you." "No price necessary, sir," Zachary said quietly. "I did what any decent man would do." "The hell you did," John said bluntly. "Most men would have kept riding, not wanting to get involved. You risked your life for a stranger, and I do not take that lightly." He glanced at Katherine, then back at Zachary. "Come to dinner tonight. The Foster house, 7 o'clock. I want to hear the whole story, and I want to properly thank the man who saved my daughter's life." Zachary looked like he wanted to refuse, but Katherine spoke up before he could. "Please come," she said. "I would like to see you again." Something flickered in those gray-blue eyes, and after a moment he nodded. 7 o'clock, then. I will be there." The rest of the day passed in a blur. The doctor examined Katherine and confirmed that her knee would heal with rest, and she had no frostbite despite her ordeal. The sheriff took her statement about the stagecoach attack and the murder of the driver, and posses were organized to hunt down the Garrett gang before they could strike again. Katherine's father barely left her side, as if afraid she might disappear if he looked away. But through it all, Katherine found her thoughts returning to Zachary Frost, the way he had appeared out of the snow like an answer to a prayer, the gentle competence of his hands as he tended her injuries, the strength of his arms around her as they rode, the quiet intensity in his eyes when he looked at her across the firelight. She told herself she was being foolish. She had known the man less than a day. What she felt was gratitude and relief, nothing more. But as she bathed and dressed for dinner, choosing her best green dress and taking extra care with her hair, Katherine knew she was lying to herself. Something had happened out there in the wilderness, something that went beyond simple gratitude. Zachary arrived exactly at 7, cleaned up and wearing what were clearly his best clothes, his hair still damp from a bath. He looked uncomfortable in the formal dining room of the Foster house, clearly more at ease in the wilderness than in polite society, but he answered John's questions with quiet honesty and downplayed his own role in the rescue. "Your daughter saved herself," he said. "She survived 3 days in brutal conditions with outlaws hunting her. All I did was provide a warm fire and safe passage home. The courage was all hers." Katherine felt her cheeks warm at his words. Their eyes met across the table, and that same electric awareness from the night before sparked between them. John noticed, and his eyes narrowed thoughtfully, but he said nothing. After dinner, John excused himself to his study, claiming business to attend to but obviously giving them time alone. Katherine walked Zachary to the front door, neither of them quite ready to say goodbye. "Will I see you again?" Katherine asked, then felt foolish for being so forward. "I would like that," Zachary said quietly. "If you would like it too." "I would," Katherine said. "Very much." Zachary smiled, a real smile that lit up his whole face and made him even more handsome. "Then I will call on you tomorrow if that is acceptable. Maybe we could take a walk if your knee is up to it." "I would love that," Katherine said. He tipped his hat to her and left. and Katherine stood in the doorway watching him go, her heart beating faster than it had even when she was running for her life through the snow. Over the next weeks, Zachary called on her every day. They took walks through Lewiston, Katherine leaning on his arm with her knees still healing. They sat in the parlor of the Foster house and talked for hours about everything and nothing. He told her about his life in the mountains, the freedom and beauty and occasional loneliness. She told him about her dreams of expansion for her father's business, about wanting to be more than just a woman in a man's world. "You are already more," Zachary said one afternoon as they sat on the porch watching the winter sun set over the mountains. "You are the strongest person I have ever met, man or woman. You survived something that would have broken most people." "Only because you found me," Katherine said softly. "No," Zachary said firmly. "You would have survived regardless. You had already made it 3 days. You would have found a way." Katherine turned to look at him, this man who had become so important to her in such a short time. "I am glad you found me anyway," she said. "Not just because you saved my life, because I got to meet you, because you are sitting here beside me now." Zachary reached for her hand, the first time he had deliberately touched her since that night in the wilderness. His fingers laced through hers, warm and strong and sure. "I am glad, too," he said quietly. "More than I can say." 2 weeks after her rescue, news came that the Garrett gang had been caught trying to cross into Montana territory. There was a shootout with federal marshals, and 3 of the 5 gang members were killed. The remaining 2 were in custody awaiting trial. Katherine would have to testify eventually, but the immediate danger was past. That evening, Zachary took her to dinner at Lewiston's finest restaurant, and Katherine knew something had changed between them. There was a new intensity in the way he looked at her, a barely restrained emotion that made her pulse quicken. "Katherine," he said after they had finished eating, his voice serious, "I need to tell you something, and I need you to be honest with me about how you feel." Katherine's heart was hammering now. "All right." "I have been in love with you since that first night in the wilderness," Zachary said, the words coming out in a rush. "Maybe even since the first moment I saw you pressed against that tree, terrified but not giving up. I know it is fast. I know we have only known each other a few weeks, but I cannot deny what I feel. You are the most remarkable woman I have ever met, and I want to spend my life with you if you will have me." Katherine felt tears spring to her eyes, but they were happy tears. "I love you too," she said. "I think I have loved you since you said I was safe, since you wrapped your coat around me and kept watch all night to protect me. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you see me as more than just John Foster's daughter." Zachary reached across the table and took both her hands in his. "Then marry me, Katherine. Be my wife. I do not have much to offer, just a small ranch and a life in these mountains, but I swear I will spend every day making you happy." "Yes," Katherine said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you." He stood and pulled her to her feet, and right there in the restaurant he kissed her for the first time. It was gentle and reverent and filled with promise, and Katherine felt like her heart might burst from happiness. They were married 6 weeks later in February 1883, on a clear, cold day with the mountains gleaming white in the distance. John Foster gave his daughter away with tears in his eyes, and the whole town of Lewiston turned out for the celebration. Katherine wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her, and Zachary wore a new suit that John had insisted on buying for him. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife and Zachary kissed her, Katherine thought about that desperate girl running through the snow just 2 months ago, certain she was going to die in the wilderness. She thought about how Zachary had appeared like a miracle, how he had said those 4 words that changed everything. "You are safe now here." And she was. She was safe and loved and about to start a new life with the most extraordinary man she had ever met. They spent their first months of marriage at Zachary's ranch, which Katherine immediately fell in love with. It was small but well-maintained, with a sturdy cabin and good grazing land. She learned to help with the horses and the cattle, and Zachary taught her more about tracking and wilderness survival. In return, she helped him expand his guiding business, using her head for numbers and organization to turn it into a profitable enterprise. John Foster offered Zachary a position managing security for all his mining operations, and after some discussion, they accepted. It meant better income and the ability to expand the ranch, but Zachary made it clear he would still take tracking jobs and guide expeditions through the mountains he loved. Katherine supported him completely, knowing that the wilderness was as much a part of him as breathing. In November 1883, their first child was born, a boy they named Samuel after the man who had led the search party that found them. He had his father's gray-blue eyes and his mother's determination, and both parents doted on him shamelessly. 2 years later came a daughter named Sarah, with Katherine's dark hair and Zachary's quiet intensity. Life was not always easy. The winters were harsh and the work was hard, and there were times when money was tight despite their relative prosperity. But Katherine had never been happier. Every morning, she woke up beside the man she loved, and every evening they sat on their porch watching the sun set over the mountains where their story began. On their 5th anniversary, Zachary took Katherine back to the spot where he had found her, now accessible by a better trail he had helped cut through the mountains. They stood in the clearing where she had collapsed against that pine tree, where he had appeared through the snow and changed both their lives forever. "You ever regret it?" Katherine asked. "Taking on a half-frozen woman with outlaws on her trail. Your life was simpler before me." Zachary pulled her close, his arms around her waist, and looked down at her with those remarkable eyes that still made her heart skip. "My life was emptier before you," he said. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Katherine Frost. Every single day with you is a gift." Katherine reached up to kiss him there in the wilderness where their love story began. "You saved my life that day," she said softly. "No," Zachary said, echoing words he had spoken years ago. "You saved yourself. I just got to be there when it mattered." They rode back to the ranch as the sun was setting, and Katherine thought about all the twists of fate that had brought them to this moment. The stagecoach attack that should have killed her. The 3 desperate days running through the snow. The moment when Zachary appeared and said those 4 perfect words. All of it had led here, to this life they had built together, to the family waiting at home and the love that grew stronger with every passing day. That evening, after the children were asleep, Katherine and Zachary sat on their porch as they did most nights. The stars were bright in the clear mountain air, and somewhere in the distance a wolf howled. Zachary took her hand, that same simple gesture that still filled her with warmth. "Happy?" he asked. "More than I ever thought possible," Katherine said truthfully, and she was. The girl who had run through the snow expecting to die had instead found the great love of her life. The man who rode alone through the wilderness had found his other half. Together they had built something beautiful and lasting, a partnership based on mutual respect and deep abiding love. Years passed, and their family grew. Another son arrived in 1889, named Zachary after his father but called by his middle name, Thomas, to avoid confusion. Their daughter Sarah grew into a skilled rider who loved the mountains as much as her father, while Samuel showed his mother's head for business and eventually took over management of the expanded ranch operations. Katherine continued to work alongside her husband in all his enterprises. She became known throughout Idaho Territory as a woman of strong opinions and stronger will, someone who spoke her mind and commanded respect in a world dominated by men. Zachary was her greatest champion, never threatened by her strength but proud of it, always making sure she had equal say in every decision that affected their life together. In 1890, Idaho became a state, and the Frosts celebrated with the rest of their community. Lewiston continued to grow and prosper, and the Frost Ranch grew with it. They expanded their cattle operations, and Zachary's guiding business became the most respected in the region. People came from across the country to hire him to lead expeditions through the mountains, and Katherine managed the bookings and logistics with the same efficiency she had once applied to her father's mining operations. John Foster remained a constant presence in their lives until his death in 1895. He had been so proud of his daughter and the life she built, proud of the man she chose and the way they partnered in everything. In his will, he left Katherine his share of the mining operations, making her one of the wealthiest women in Idaho. She and Zachary used that wealth wisely, investing in their community and in conservation efforts to preserve the wilderness they both loved. The Garrett gang trial had come and gone years earlier. Katherine testified with quiet dignity, and both surviving gang members were sentenced to lengthy prison terms. She never spoke of those 3 days running through the snow unless asked directly, but she also never forgot them. How could she, when they had led her to everything that mattered most in her life on their 10th anniversary in 1893, their children now old enough to be left with trusted neighbors? Zachary took Katherine on an extended camping trip through the mountains. They spent 2 weeks in the wilderness, just the two of them, and it was like a second honeymoon. They made love under the stars and talked for hours by the campfire, and Katherine fell in love with her husband all over again. "You know what I remember most about that first night?" Zachary said one evening as they lay wrapped in blankets beside their fire. "Not the fear or the danger or even how beautiful you were, even half frozen and terrified. I remember thinking that you were a fighter, that you had something rare and precious inside you. And I remember hoping I would get the chance to know you better, to see who you really were beneath the fear." "And did I live up to your hopes?" Katherine asked with a smile. "You exceeded them," Zachary said seriously. "Every single day you exceed them." "You are more than I ever dreamed, Katherine, more than I deserve." "You deserve everything," Katherine said fiercely. "You are the best man I have ever known, the kindest and strongest and most honorable. Our children are lucky to have you as a father, and I am lucky to have you as my husband." They kissed in the firelight, and later made love with the slow tenderness of two people who knew each other completely, and loved what they knew. Katherine thought about how different her life might have been if Zachary had not found her that day, if she had frozen in the snow or been caught by the gang. She thought about all the moments that had led to this one, and she was grateful for every single one of them, even the terrifying ones, because they had brought her here. The years continued to pass in a blur of work and love and family. Their children grew and started families of their own. Samuel married a schoolteacher from Lewiston and took over complete management of the ranch, allowing Zachary and Katherine to slow down a bit in their middle years. Sarah married a forest ranger and moved to northern Idaho, but visited often with her growing brood of children. Thomas became a lawyer and moved to Boise, the new state capital, but returned to the ranch every summer with his wife and children. Zachary's hair turned silver, but he remained strong and vital, still taking occasional guiding jobs and tracking expeditions well into his 50s. Katherine's dark hair showed threads of white, but her mind remained sharp and her opinions as strong as ever. They had weathered storms, both literal and figurative, had built something that would last beyond their own lifetimes, had loved each other through joy and sorrow and everything in between. In 1903, on their 20th anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a massive celebration. There were over 30 people present, all descended from or connected to Katherine and Zachary's love story. As Katherine looked around at the assembled family, at the life they had built, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude and love. That evening, after everyone had gone to bed, Katherine and Zachary sat on their porch one more time. They were both in their 40s now, their children grown, their hair graying, but when Zachary took her hand it felt exactly the same as it had 20 years ago. "You remember what you said to me that first night?" Katherine asked. "After you found me." "You are safe now here," Zachary said immediately. "Of course I remember. It was the moment my life changed forever." "Mine too," Katherine said. "I was so scared and so certain I was going to die, and then you appeared and said those words and I knew everything was going to be all right. Not just that night, but everything. My whole life. Because you were in it." Zachary turned to face her fully, his eyes still that remarkable gray-blue despite the lines that crinkled around them now. "I love you, Katherine Frost. I have loved you for 20 years, and I will love you for 20 more and however many we get after that. You are my heart, my partner, my best friend. You are everything." "I love you too," Katherine said, tears slipping down her cheeks. "More than words can say. You saved me in every way a person can be saved." They kissed there in the starlight, two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life that exceeded either of their dreams. The mountains rose dark against the night sky, eternal and unchanging, witness to their love story and all the stories that came after. Katherine and Zachary lived another 30 years together, watching their grandchildren grow and have children of their own, seeing Idaho transform from a rough frontier territory into a prosperous state. They never left the ranch they had built together, never tired of the mountains they both loved, never stopped holding hands on their porch every evening when Zachary died peacefully in his sleep at 74. Katherine held his hand one last time and whispered, "You are safe now here." It was what he had said to her all those years ago in the snow, and it seemed only right that she say it back to him as he took his final journey. She missed him terribly, but she was not lost without him. He had taught her strength and shown her love, and those lessons carried her through the remaining years of her life. Katherine Foster Frost died at 81, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, a matriarch who had lived an extraordinary life. She was buried beside Zachary in the small cemetery on their ranch, under the shadow of the mountains where their story began. But their love story did not end there. It lived on in their descendants, in the ranch that still operated under the Frost name, in the tales told around campfires about the woman who survived the wilderness, and the man who saved her. It lived on in every person who faced impossible odds and did not give up, in every love that bloomed unexpected and true. And on cold winter nights, when the snow fell soft and silent on the Idaho mountains, some folks swore you could still see them, Katherine and Zachary, riding together through the wilderness where they found each other. A love story written in snow and sealed with words that changed two lives forever. You are safe now here.